Hi, everyone. My name is AJ Retker. I am the author of Oathbreaker and Season of Kings. I am joined today by some amazing Grimdark authors. And yeah, we're having our first ever multi-author talk on the channel. So thank you guys so much for guys and girls, sorry, for joining us. If you
I can be
want,
guys. I'm good with that.
okay, that's my one bad habit. That's like I always say guys.
Me too. So we're good.
Okay. Why don't we go around and introduce ourselves and our books and get it to the audience to, like, I guess, be acclimated to our work. I guess we'll go
I guess I'll
counter,
go
yeah,
first.
clockwise.
My name is Crystal Matar. I wrote Spiffbo Finalist, Legacy of the Brightwash, which has been affectionately termed cozy grimdark. Oh, thank you. um, um, I guess that's it. That's the only one I have out right now.
So I'm Sean Crow. I've got 4 books out at the moment: Godless Lands, Quenched in Blood, Valhalla Steel, and Wrath of the Hungry God. I've got a sci-fi series and low fantasy going at the moment, and hopefully more to come.
Hey, I'm NC. My novel came out on the 16th of September. Sort of messy and wrath. You can see that. Yeah. My green
It's
screen
just
is
a brand new baby.
Yeah, I'm just a brand new baby. Yeah, and it's been really exciting so far. Like, the response has been incredible. I think last night I got up to top 10 in free, because I'm doing a free promotion at the moment. So if you want my book, get it for free. But yeah, so it's top. It got up to the 10th place last night in dark fantasy, which
Nice.
was incredible.
Congrats.
So yeah, I'm really stoked.
All right. We're also joined by John, who's supposed to be on the panel but is not feeling the greatest. He is the author of The Trials of Ashmont, which is, I have a bit of jealousy with John because like his book is all over my Twitter feed.
Yeah.
And just like every time I open Twitter,
He's
Trials of Ashmont.
killing it.
Yeah, he's absolutely crushing it right now. So I'm more excited for the guy. He deserves it, but still, yeah. Sad that you can't join us today, John. And then we're also joined by Kareem, who tried to be the first, but John was the first. All right. So let's start with the first question, everyone. What about Grimdark appeals to you? Like, how did you say I'm going to write Grimdark and not like say like epic fantasy or one of the other plethora of subgenres in fantasy?
For me, I don't know. I just kind of fell into it. It was just the group that seemed to really well to my work. I didn't even really go in thinking grimdark. And I don't even know if I really classify myself that, but grimdark people really like it, so I guess it must.
Yeah.
But yeah, no intention at all. Just I love the gritty aspect of it. I mean, it's no holds barred. You're not some magical world where everyone can get healed left and right or anything like that. It's this is the grittiest reality you can come up with. So I guess that's what really drew me to the genre.
Right.
Yeah, my answer is similar. I didn't know I was writing grimdark until people told me that my book's pretty rough, and I thought I was worried about people calling it grimdark at first, just because I was like, "There's no way it's not that bad, is it?" And then people reported to me, "Yes, actually, it is that bad." So I'm leaning into it now, and it's the same thing where I think there's just a slightly different angle to the violence in Grimdark that appeals to me. We get a rap of us being gratuitous in our violence, but I feel like you know it, it's just a different, more visceral angle to that violence that has always appealed to me, and a weight to it rather than mowing down armies and everyone's fine after it. It's like a no, these people are going to feel this for a long time, and that appeals to me as a storyteller. So I kind of fell into the grimdark crowd quite naturally once I learned more about it.
Yeah, look, I'm pretty much the same. Like I feel like we're all agreeing on this point. We
Yeah.
sort of fell into it.
Good start.
But yeah, it's kind of like, for me, I've never been one to shy away from violence in my writing and trying to do something, because I grew up on Tolkien and like you know, all the fantasy mainstays like Robin Hobb and Raymond D. Feist and all them, and you see that, you read them, and the violence it's there, but it's not like, you know, people get hit with an arrow and then suddenly the next day they're fine, like or they just get hit, patched up, and you know, they don't get any scars, or even, you know, physical scars or mental scars, whatever.
Mental
So I sort of
scars.
wanted to explore that. Like, I guess I didn't really go into it thinking I was going to be writing Grimdark, but kind of fell into it.
Mm-hmm.
But I wanted to explore that aspect of, you know, not only do we get physical pain, but we also get mental pain, and like how that can change a person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the mental aspect's huge in Grimdark, especially like if you look at the goats of Grimdark, like Joe Abercrombie. You know, he's kind of a bone of contention for me, but he had definitely his Grimdark is always very mentally heavy on that. And I feel like that's kind of what separates Grimdark from normal fantasy. Like we said, there's violence, and then there's that mental capacity adds to the Grimdark.
Yeah, I think just take all that glamour away. You know? Like, one of the things, you see it in lots. You have people like, oh, having this glib conversation while they're killing people, and no, it's a brutal, mean, nasty son of a down to it, and that's what. Yeah.
John commented, if it'll load. There you go. A grimdark world has realistic consequences for main characters, sometimes including death, and that keeps me on my toes.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah, when you
Yeah.
throw something at a character, they're gonna feel it,
Mm-hmm.
and it's not gonna be pretty.
Well, you hope they do. Otherwise, where are the stakes? This is what I
Well,
sort of
yeah,
yeah. It's like kind of, I don't know. It's an interesting sort of point to make, like how, for me, I establish stakes. That is kind of like just how a character can die in this world.
Mm-hmm. And building off that, like your comment and John's comment, have you guys ever like written yourself into a corner, and you're like, oh man, the consequences like should say my main character is supposed to be like brutally maimed or killed in this, and like, but there's still like 10 chapters left in the book. I can't have this situation happen yet. So then you have to delete a really good chapter.
That's what I've been struggling with as I revise the sequel to Brightwash, where, you know, it ends in such a way that I want there to be serious consequences for his horrible choices, but there's a balance there of, you know, realistic consequences versus a good story, and you know, if he gets, oh, how do I say it without dropping spoilers? If he gets thrown in prison and he's in prison for half a book, it's no longer a good story. So how do we balance that with motion and agency and, you know, all of that? So that's my very long way of saying yes, absolutely. I write myself into consequence corners.
Yeah. I can't think that I've actually written myself into a corner, but I mean, I always picture endings first. So I try to say, okay, how do I get this character to that ending? And so I'm always pretty mindful of that going in,
Right.
you know. But at the same time, you look at like an author like Jim Butcher, not necessarily grimdark, but I mean, part of Dresden's character, I don't know if you guys read Jim Butcher a whole lot, but the Dresden Files, that guy gets the snot beat all the time. You know, and you know, it's you want to make it believable, but at the same time, add those restrictions in there.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, just is there anyone? Here's a question I kind of commented off the top of my head. Is there anyone in the grimdark scene that, or any writer, I guess, in the fantasy genre that you think we should look out for that's up and coming?
Well, you always got to watch out for Clayton Snyder because you never know what he's going to do to you
Yeah.
if you don't keep an eye on him.
Yeah, him and Michael Fletcher last year in the Spiff Bowl. I was like, holy shit.
Yeah,
They
that
kinda-
that book was that I got to beta it as they were putting it together, and man, that was an amazing thing to witness. Just like the depths of their insanity as they play off of each other's strengths. But I mean, they're pretty well established. I think they're,
Mhm.
but don't turn your back on Clayton.
Yeah.
I'd say, you know, I'm working through Tim Hardy right now.
Yes.
About halfway through his first book. It's great so far. I just, you know, I love how he's writing it. It's coming. HLT, he really knocked her. Yes.
My Sippo friends.
Yeah. You know, and then
Go
Jake,
on.
you want to, Dark Oak.
By Jacob Sanix.
Oh, Jacob Sanix.
That was probably one of my darker reads this year. When I got toward the end, I was just like, holy crap. Like, whew.
That's saying a lot too.
I know. I was like, I'm gonna step away from that and go contemplate a few things. I got pretty quick. Not gruesome, just he would.
It's the angle. It's
Yeah.
you could write the same sequence in a couple of different styles, in fantasy, and the same things could happen, but it's the details specifically that comes up in Grimdark that just like you feel it. You feel the cringe in your whole body. So that's the fun stuff.
Yeah, honestly, I don't really know because I'm just getting into the indie thing.
Yeah, you're just getting into it.
And I've been aware of it for probably I read Grimdark, Joe Abercrombie, and mind you, I haven't read the first trilogy. I can't even remember the name of now, but I've read The Age of Madness, and that really sort of pushed me into that direction of writing more realistic stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, Samil is incredible.
Yeah.
I just read it.
I don't know if he's sort of there though. Like he's not. Well, I mean, he's not huge, but he's like,
he's definitely he's making a name for himself.
Sort of up and come, but yeah.
Yeah, and then Kareem also said he's so brutal. I believe he's mad. Yeah, I've read Gunmetal Gods. It's a ride. And then John, very kindly, up and coming, all of us. Very, very kind.
John is up. He's already there.
Yeah. John skipped coming. He just fucking debuted it and went right to the top. Yeah. I can't believe how some people just absolutely catch that wave at the right time.
Yeah.
It
just goes to show that we can do everything in our power to write a good book and market a good book, but there's no accounting for timing. And you can't, and that's not to say that he doesn't deserve it. It's just that we're all kind of trying to make our voices heard, and then if you just shout at the right moment, everybody catches you.
I come originally from a music background, and I played in bands, and it's similar in books. Especially with the internet, you have this oversaturation of the market where everyone has a voice. It seems like everyone has a book. How have you all kind of punch through that oversaturation? Say hey, I actually have a quality book here. It's actually good. What's been your strategy, or how have you managed to do it? Because you guys have all punched your way through my timeline, and you've gotten through the noise, at least for me on my algorithm.
I notice. I mean, just like finishing a book takes a certain amount of insanity and determination. The social media game seems to be the same thing, where like if you are relentless, eventually people remember who you are. And it's something that I came across accidentally, because I guess I'm a bit of an extrovert when it comes to the social medias, where I was just on Twitter before I had a book, and I was just hanging out with writers and talking to everybody and listening to what people had to say. And then, unbeknownst to me, I was making some pretty awesome connections. And then, so when I had a product to sell, people were ready for it. And then I also noticed over the summer, I was stepping back from the socials a bit, just to finish the sequel, as well as just deal with real life stuff. And my impact dropped, which on the one hand is discouraging, because it means, you know, you have to be always on at some point. But at the other hand, it's like, at least I can see now I'm back on social media and I'm swinging back up again the other side. And it just seems like being available and being around helps a lot more than I expected. And it was totally an accident, and I guess I'm going to keep doing it.
For me, it's just been continuous content. I mean, I decided to head in 2020 to start doing it. And me, it was like, well, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it seriously. Before that, I did not own a cell phone. I hated it. Yeah. I want to find out what books are out there, and I want to put my books in the world. You ever see my stuff? I rarely ever post personal things or anything like that. It's all writing based and stuff like that. But no, I decided that my goal was by 2023, I want to have 5 books out. So I should be on track to get 3 books, a little less than 2 a year. And I think having that output, especially doing that blitz right at the beginning, is really effective, because people go, oh, we've got a lot of content instead of waiting. Because I feel like when you have that waiting in between and you have those big gaps, then it's hard
you sink a bit
there. And then
you got to strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah. And short stories constantly. When I first up my website, I wrote several short stories, just stuff, different worlds, different concepts, some of the same worlds. And I got a lot of readers that way. And I was figuring out, you know, you can read on your website what people, you know, how many readers am I getting for this? How many readers am I getting for that? And so, this is a good concept, because I have a bunch of people commenting on this or contacting me on this. And that's been really an effect. You know, I don't know that Godless Land would have gotten off the ground if it hadn't been for a number of things. You got to work with Thomas, who's the artist that does all the great. His artwork helped a ton, and just people respond to that world. So, you know, that's kind of helped me. I'm big on monitoring and just playing with the numbers, all numbers game.
Yeah. I think for me, it's just, you know, I see an opportunity come along, I'm not shy about taking it. And that's one of the biggest things. Like, I reached out to people who were looking for, you know, someone else to be on a panel with P.L. Stewart and Justin T. Cole. And I was like, damn, why don't I put my hand up? I'm probably going to get a knockback and say, no, you're just some baby debut author. Who cares about you? But no, I actually got it. I got on there, and just that opportunity and exposure is, and I think it goes back to what I saw a quote by Fonda Lee on Twitter the other day, where it said, she said that for people to buy your book, you have to be seen 6 or 7 times, 7 or 8 times, and just that constant exposure. And it may feel like spam, like you're just spamming the timeline with your stuff, but people, like, the way that the algorithm works, people only see it one or two things, and you just got to keep posting. And I think that's the way to go, and keep seizing those opportunities. And I mean, it seems to be going well for me as well.
Yeah, to build off that, like how what the algorithm sees. One of my fans rated my book Oathbreaker in 2021 his 7th favorite book, and I just saw it yesterday, and that was posted in like December 2021, and I was like, oh my god, why did I not see this? This has been almost a year.
Yeah,
But
yeah. Well, and I also noticed, like NC was saying, he thought he was going to be rejected because he's brand new, but the community is very supportive of people who are putting themselves out there and trying to be heard. And I think it's a growing audience right now, and it's a growing career path. I'm not sure what I'm trying to say, but it's just there's so much out there which feels discouraging, but at the same time it also means we're not alone in this. Like, there's a lot of people out there slogging the same slog, and we're all kind of watching each other's backs, and that's a good feeling, which is probably strange for a Grimdark author panel to say, but it's true.
Well,
we've got each other. We're a band of brothers and all that.
Yeah. Well, I think you that when I don't know if you were all following that whole Amazon ordeal where people were returning all the books, but I saw on a lot of those indie groups, a lot of those authors signed the petition, stuff like that. Like, hey, cut this back. So we're not having these people return a book after 7 days when they read it in 2, and
and then buying the next book and the next book and the next book.
Exactly, and not getting anything from that. So that happened. Then Amazon changed their ruling, so now they've got a stricter policy. It's pretty cool. Like you were saying, they all banded together and got something done.
John,
it's funny, isn't it? That where we write such awful things and we're all just like super chill people.
That's like again, like coming from the music background, it's funny because I listen to a lot of heavy metal and death metal, and I was like, oh, those people are so scary, but like they're like the nicest down to earth musicians you'll ever meet in your life. Like there's one. Oh, go ahead.
There's a lot to be said for a personality that's willing to confront darker and heavier emotions and forms of art, because we, instead of denying it and bottling it up and kind of rotting from the inside, we have this outlet of being able to express it in a way that's obviously a lot safer than some of the other ways people express themselves in the world. So there's something to be said for it as an outlet for very human trials and tribulations. And I think it's, in my life experience, I always do better when I have it as a way to, release the pressure valve,
Yeah, for sure.
You know what? There is a lot of, like Abercrombie, right? The man is a writer. Like, pros are not have a ton of respect, but my one problem with the whole Grimdark thing, which is why I've always been kind of hesitant to fully embrace it, a lot of it has like no hope or a very feel to it. And I think one of the I like the glimmers of hope that come through, right? Little silver linings, because I feel like in Grimdark, if you get those authors that are Grimdark but also add that aspect, it really make it a great story, because there is a reason to cling to that. For all the mire, all the muck that you have, there's still that strand, and so there's still a bit of good, or there's still a little flicker in there. At least I'm familiar with everybody's work, but
I definitely agree, and it has been my approach too, where like I had to add some in later drafts, a little bit of hope, because it got so bleak that I was like, I can't do this. I can't make a career out of something that's this bleak. Like, there has to be something that I'm hanging on to. So later versions got a little bit cozier.
Yeah. Well, like when I talked to Ryan Cahill, author of the Bound and Broken series, was on my channel earlier, and he coined the term Grimheart, whereas like it's dark, but then a little bit of heartwarming with a little bit of hope. And I think I try to go in that direction too, like Sean said. Like, otherwise, like, what's the point? It's just all nihilistic. Like, it's just everything's shit. Why?
Yeah.
Why does the hero get out of bed in the morning?
It's got to be something to fight for.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but I think also it's fun to convince the characters that there's no hope, and then they fight anyway, and then they earn it, and those victories feel like monumental.
It also makes your antagonist interesting, because your antagonist
Mm.
rarely the worst being around. They could just be also trying to struggle. You know, they have their own goals, they have their own objectives. It's terrible when you get two, you're both kind of rooting for, one's on the wrong side, on the other, and they're not going to change their ways. You're going, well, that's how life goes, I guess.
Yeah.
And C, do you have anything to add to that little tangent that we went off?
To kind of go down that path, like definitely feel that there should be at least a glimmer of hope. It's like, what's the point? What am I reading this for? It's very nihilistic. Like I'd put it down and just go, okay, what do I do with my life now? But yeah, like I'm similar to Crystal. Like I can't make a career out of bleakness. Like I want to be excited and I want to write something that I'm interested in, and that just happens to have a bit of a grimdark tinge to it, a very a dark tinge to it, because shit happens in real life as well,
Mm-hmm.
and life can be quite dark. But like I try to reflect that, but it also has hope. It also has hopeful moments, and I guess like I've heard grim bright before, which is maybe another of these like portmanteau names that we just endlessly come up with. But something like that. Grim heart, grim bright. Maybe I write that sort of thing as well.
I tried to touch on right there. See, I don't do Twitter very much. I struggle with posts that it wasn't meant to like slam grimdark authors, because obviously I fit into that category too. But
Yeah.
and it pissed
Well,
me off. I was just like, holy cow! Like I just was trying to be funny, and then you're like, man, it just people out there that do like that.
Well, I think genre is a sliding scale, especially when we're talking about tone, and we get into the very edge, like Beyond Redemption by Michael Fletcher, and it's a slog, and he's got something to say. Every single book that he puts out, no matter how horrible it is, he's got something very poignant to say. But I think just for me, when I'm creating, I have to be a little bit off of the polar extreme of the standard that he's setting, because but he does it really well, and I'm always in awe of the things that he's able to come up with. And I think that's kind of what you were saying, where all the way at the extremes, it's heavy, and there's only so much time you can spend over there. And I've even seen authors who write like that talk about how they have to take a break sometimes and go read something else for a while. So it's just a spectrum, maybe.
When I first wrote Oathbreaker, my first book, I didn't think it was that dark. I just thought, it's whatever. And then one of the reviews, someone said, after reading it, I think I'm going to go read something lighter, like the Book of Revelations. I was like, oh boy. I was like, is it that bad? So there's sometimes like I'm just oblivious to. I'm like, oh, that's cool. And then just I realize like, oh shit, maybe I dialed it up a little too much for some people.
Yeah, I went through the same thing with early reviews. I was like, it's not that dark, is it? Like, there's not a whole lot of stuff on the page. It's all just kind of societal and stuff. But I get, people posting reviews for like big trigger warning for this and that, and it's like, this is the bleakest book I've ever read. It's like, is it that bad? And then when I got the audio from Podium, I was listening to it, and it just hit my brain differently, just listening to somebody say these words out loud that I wrote, and I was like, holy shit, this is rough. Who wrote this? So there's a weird connection that when you're in the book and you're building it, you can't necessarily see what you've done.
Right. Kareem had a great question. So, in our opinion, what are the minimum requirements to grant a book the Grimdark stamp?
Do Grimdark readers like it?
Yeah.
Pretty on the nose there.
Do readers update you and say, "Oh man, this is really rough. I think I have to take a break"?
I mean, that because I didn't even think anything about my work being like that. You know, I kind of tried to toe in after kind of Louis L'Amour's demo, you know, that heroic but with some actual consequences. But yeah, and I was like, oh, the Grimdark people really are into it. So, all right, there we go.
I think one characteristic for Grimdark that a lot of other genres don't have is like the lack or at least reduced plot armor that the main characters get.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot where like some people are like, you're like, come on, like you survive that. And
I think another thing is whether or not the circumstances are systemic. So like in heroic fantasy, you get more like the society is relatively stable and relatively good, or at least neutral, and there's a bad guy that everyone's banding together to stop. There's a thing happening that is going to change things for the worse if they don't stop it. Whereas Grimdark, it seems to be that the bad things is the way of life, and the battle is against a larger problem, whether it's, you know, whether or not it's a military fantasy where, you know, wars are happening but both sides are questionable, or if it's a societal problem, or, you know, that sort of thing, and they're battling against a problem that maybe can't be solved, but they're battling it anyway, or they're in it for themselves to get something. That seems to be a switch for readers, where the atmosphere and the weight seems to signal this one's grimdark.
Yeah, to add to that, I think I'd agree with John, where, you know, characters are kind of shit people, and they, you know, they don't have like justifiable ends and justifiable ways of getting their stuff done, what they want to get done, and their actions are quite questionable, but you still root for them anyway because they're just that compelling. And, you know, I think that's probably one of the best things about Grimdark is that you can have people who are realistic and they're crap people, and they make bad choices and they suffer the consequences of those bad choices, and they change in realistic ways. And I think that's one of the most powerful things about Grimdark as a genre, and, you know, in its entirety, is to just see how someone can be. You can still root for someone who's an awful person.
Right. My main question to all of you is, do you have like writing backgrounds? Did any of you like major in English in college, or take writing classes or anything? Because like for me, if you read my first book, Oathbreaker, you can tell this guy has no idea what the fuck he's doing. Like I made, like, a lot of people bitched, or not bitched, I said constructively criticized, because they're valid critiques. I have a slang of just using swears because I'm white trash. But they say your main character's very unlikable. I could give a shit what happens to this main character. He's annoying, he's whiny, and so it's like, oh. And another critique was that there's no antagonist. It's just them doing like a quest, like Dungeons and Dragons style, because that's the only storytelling I knew was DMing a group. So it's like, okay, there's always another encounter. There's another encounter. So when I look back at that book, I'm like, yeah, people can definitely tell I had no formal writing training at all. Because it's kind of a train wreck. It's a good book, but I mean, I'm a little harsh on myself.
It was major college for a bit, and then I realized I could get a job with it. And so but my college was great. Even then, it was like every politics. Even in creative writing courses, you're going, what? This is creative story. Oh, no, we're going to analogy of what? No, let's do something else. So that, yeah, I do. I teach English in the correctional facility I'm at and whatnot. But so I get that formal training.
My answer is exactly the opposite. I'm a high school dropout. My mother has a story that she loves to tell that the school would call saying that I wasn't in class, and my grandparents would be upset wondering if I was out on the street doing drugs, and my mom would go and find me at the library surrounded in history books because school was boring. However, I've read voraciously in fantasy and other genres as long as I can remember. And I educated myself. At some point, I decided I was going to be a writer, and that was it. And what I would do was I would read books that I didn't enjoy and try to break down why they didn't work for me. And then I would read my favorites like David Gemmell and do the same thing, break down exactly what it was about his books that were so fantastic to me. And I would take books that I hated and try to imagine how he would tell them, just because I was just so interested in the emotional response that a good book got and a bad book got, or in my opinion. And that's how I got here.
I could high five you with the David Gemmell reference. I would.
Yeah, his books changed me. His books.
Oh, yeah.
I think I got the first one. I don't have them out. I got the first one when I was about 12, and those books gave me something to dream for. Like, they gave me a reason to hang on through the slog that was my young life. And then I got Storm Rider when I was about 14, and that was like, I'm going to be a writer. That's it. I'm going to do this for somebody. So,
I feel like with him, I feel like a lot of Grimdark authors actually, I Gemmell, because when I was growing up, I always called him Gamel. And I realized it was
me too.
I didn't reading. I didn't like anything until I was like 14, 15. Got grounded for like 3 months for being dumb and couldn't do anything. I'm sitting there. My dad throws me the Legend of Death, or not the Legend of Death, Chronicles of Druss the Legend. Throws that to me, and from that point on, I was hooked. That man,
yeah. Druss is a good.
My youngest,
I always
named Druss.
Yeah, I always admired the way he put the one fatherly character as a nod to his stepfather. But this is gonna turn into the David Gemmell podcast.
All right.
And see what about you?
Yeah, for me, yeah, I mean, I almost failed English in high school, so I don't know how I ended up here. No, my teacher was terrible, Mrs. Mullins. If you're listening, I hate you. Honestly, she was the worst. But I hated English after that, and writing anything just killed me. And then I think it was like 4 or 5 years ago, 2018, and I was in a bit of a depressed sort of mood, and I was having a really rough time actually. And I just decided to be like, okay, I need something to do. I need some sort of creative outlet. My wife has been incredible to give me that sort of realization that I needed a creative outlet. And I said, why don't I just try and write a novel? And that kind of turned into something. And then I was like, okay, I can actually do this. This is really fun. Because I used to do it when I was a kid. I used to just write stories after stories after stories. And I think the one I do remember was one where it was about this Triceratop family. And I talk about this in my blog. And it was like, I was 9, and I just remember this family going around, and then suddenly the meteor comes And I just found out about the meteors wiping out the dinosaurs, and I was like, how would Triceratops family, how would they think about a meteor? And that, but yeah, I think we all start some similar story when we're 9 years old and just on a notepad and just writing it down. Yeah.
I was really big into Warcraft when I was fourth grade, and our teacher gave us. I have very little memory. My memory sucks, but I remember I got in trouble for something, and so we got called in, and it was my story, and I wrote the story about me and all my friends, and we were all heroes in this Warcraft world. All of them died in the end, and there were demons in on their shields and stuff like that. My teacher thought I was really disturbed.
You're just writing Grimdark.
Yeah.
Proto Grimdark.
Right.
Baby.
But yeah, it's like the meteor comes. I was like, yeah, I wonder if like we all have a little bit of us, even as we were kids, like, oh yeah,
sadistic streak, yeah.
Yeah, I remember I used to watch war movies with my dad all the time. Like that was me, my dad's pastime. Watching like Saving Private Ryan, Band of Brothers, all that stuff.
Oh,
like
yeah.
loved it. And so I was like, my first book I remember writing was a military history, which was full of historical inaccuracies, but that's beside the point. The main like troops or like battalion, platoon or whatever, or get to the very end, and then they find out like basically the nuke of Hiroshima drops on them. And that's how I ended my book. And I was just like, again, historical inaccuracies, but still, like I was just like, and they all die and vaporized in the nuclear bomb. And my dad was like, he read it, he's like, this is a terrible ending. And I was like,
I'm trying to remember what my early stuff was. Because I know I was writing before David Gemmell, but I don't remember. I think my first hit of fame was fan fiction. I wrote fan fiction for like Final Fantasy VIII or something, and at the time I had the most popular fic in the category, and I was like, yeah, this is the good drugs.
Well, thanks for joining us, John. Too bad you couldn't be on the panel.
We'll have to try again.
Yeah.
He's battling us
next time.
I don't know what he has, but it does not sound fun.
No.
Get better, man.
Yeah, get better, John. Bringing me to my next question, though, what is your writing process like? Like, how do you write? Like, do you set deadlines for yourself? Do you set like word counts, or are you just like, yeah, you get an idea in the day, and you're like, oh, I'm going to go write this down now, and then just get on a roll? Or do you have like more structured, I guess?
I'm all about discipline. I do 5,000 words a week minimum. That's what I have to get before I allow myself to do something I want. So if I want, like when Elden Ring came out, I was cussing myself out for that rule because I like it. But yeah, it would be like, hey, I have to get my word. So if I do at least during the week 1,000 words a day, I'd be good. Or some days I'd have a great day, write 2 or 15, or I tally it up. And some weeks I wouldn't hit it, but just having that goal for me really helped me, just because I go, okay, 5,000 words a week, that's 20,000 words a month. That's at least one book, so that's been one thing I really latch on to, having that to hold myself accountable, because if not, then I'll let myself slide.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I hyperfixate. I get obsessed, and I have to force myself to get up and attend to the small humans that depend on me for their survival. But my drafting process is very chaotic, where the first draft can happen really fast, but it's absolute shit, and it takes me forever to fix it. But it's at some point before Brightwash, I just decided, it's now or never. There's no more dicking around doing other stuff. I'm gonna sit down every day and get something done. And at first, it had to be, a sentence a day, just because the transition of you know, going from primary caretaker to children to writing is it takes a bit of processing. So at first it was a sentence a day, and then eventually it became quite a large word count a day, minus occasionally seeing my family some days. Yeah, that's my very long and chaotic answer. It becomes obvious how I end up with such big books.
Yeah, at the moment I'm trying to scrape out as much writing time as I can between nappy changes and feeds and stuff. But yeah, before that I was doing probably about, I was trying to keep to writing every day, and
Yeah.
I didn't really set myself a writing goal, but I'd be like, okay, let's just try and get a sentence today. And sometimes I'd write, 3,000, 5,000 words in a day. But it would always start with that, just start and we'll get somewhere. And yeah, I think that discipline helped me. That was sort of essential to me because I've got ADHD and I need that goal driven kind of process. Yeah.
I need deadlines, for the same reasons. The ADHD, it's like, okay, by this time I have to have done this thing so that I can slack off for a month or two and then stress myself out for a month or two.
Just procrastinate.
You feel, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I need the pressure. If I don't feel pressure, then I'll get lazy,
Yeah, there's so many other things to do.
Right, yeah. And I'm with you guys. I got 3 kids and now we have a puppy. I don't know if we do this ourselves, but we do.
So all of you have amazing covers. Sean, I know a little bit about your story, but for the viewers and for the rest of us that don't know, how did we all get our covers? How was it a design that you just sent off to a cover editor? Did you have the image in mind? Like, how did your all amazing covers happen?
NC, do you want to go first this time?
Yeah, sure. I had a vision in mind. Like I just did a bunch of research about what is cool at the moment and what is hot in dark fantasy and grimdark fantasy. What is and for me, I always had the vision of like Celine was the main character, and I wanted to feature her because she's such a cool character. Like she's an amputee. Like she's got, spoilers, it happens in the first chapter, but she loses her left arm. And I just wanted to showcase that, it's kind of hidden. You don't really know whether it's there or not. And at first glance you go, oh, she's got all her working limbs. She's healthy, whatever. But then when you read into it and you look at the cover again, it's actually quite surprising. You can't see that arm. And that was one of the big things. Like I wanted to show that off. And I reached out to Myball Arts, who do Zamil's covers, and they're fantastic. They're very reasonably priced, and they do great stuff.
Crystal or Sean?
Well, mine was I look at artwork all the time. Like I'll get lost in it. And for me, before I wrote my first indie book, I'd written a couple of them. They're just not published. They weren't up to where I wanted them. But with reached out to one artist that I was like doing an all cause, like, hey, I'll write stories for your artwork. I always was inspired by it. And I ran into Thomas Duchek's work, and he and I just kind of clicked. He showed me there, see in my messy room, that piece, if you can get a good shot of it, which he had named Death Knight. And so it tripped my trigger. I wrote a short story and sent it his way, and we got to talking, and that's literally how Godless Lands was born. I wrote 3 short stories about his artwork, and it was all based in the same world, and he ended up doing the cover. Ferris, who you see up behind me, He's on my first cover. We kind of talked about a theme that I wanted there.
The second cover.
Yeah. Then another Ducek, and then with my Valhalla Steel, which is my fantasy, that's Anthony Valiakonis. And again, it was the same thing. I liked doing. He and I started having a conversation, and he wanted to build his portfolio. I wanted to write about some cool Vikings. And we're in a turf war with Faye. And I was like, oh, do it. And so, Valhalla Steel has 8 illustrations in it. And,
oh, wow.
So and again, this one's not a full length novel or anything, but I just love working with artists, and being able to put stuff like that together.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
cool.
It was a lot of
Envy.
But so yeah, that's kind of how I went about it. Is we can with deal with him because at the time to pay for 8 illustrations, I didn't have it. He didn't even want to take the payment, but I was like, no, we've got to work something with you. Not just drive me into the dirt. But yeah, I love working with. There's a couple others that I really want to work with in the future for some other stuff that I'm down on writing. So yeah, I like those connections. I like that how I write it, and going from there and seeing what we can come up with. A lot of fun.
Yeah, the way art and different forms of art overlaps is such an amazing process to witness and experience. I ran into Brad just pure universe. I met Justine Bergman. She did Whisper and Wonders blog for a while, and she was big in the indie space, I guess 2019 and 2020. And she's a blogger and a graphic designer and a very dear friend. And at some point she was showing us the art that her husband does. And I remember at the time I was still kind of deciding if I wanted to do indie or chase trad. And I thought to myself, man, this guy's amazing. If ever I decide to publish myself, I want him to be my cover artist. So I started asking Justine, is your husband for sale? Can I hire him? What would it cost? And so, my journey went along, and we decided it was going to happen and he could do it. And I just threw covers at him of Victorian style comps that would work, and kind of spent a really long time just talking about vibes and stuff. And he came up with this. This happens in the book, first chapter, so not a spoiler, where Tashoy draws the picture of the girl that he finds. And I was talking about that with him, and he was like, yep, that's the one. And so I remember he sketched the concept and emailed it to me, and I was just silent, if you can believe it. and it was such a neat relationship to go through. And then the same thing happened with the second book. I can't wait to be able to show people that one. And it's just, I'm always impressed by artists who can listen to me babble like this and come up with what I'm talking about. I always feel like we're speaking two different languages, but the visual artists are able to just blow me away every time. So yeah, Brad was pure luck, and I can't wait to see what he does next.
And then one more question is how have your family and friends reacted once they read your Grimdark work?
I don't think anyone was really surprised on my end. It's for me, because I don't know how the whole grim, I personally feel like my super dark, but violent, very, very reality, and I was raised by man, raised by servicemen, fighters, and boxers. Violence is the name of the game. So I'm kind of accustomed to that. So no, they weren't really surprised.
Fair enough.
Yeah, pretty much the same. Like they just said this is a great story. They haven't mentioned anything about the gratuitous violence, I guess. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of the realism and the stakes are there, and so they feel like it's a compelling story regardless of the violence or the sex or whatever.
Every time somebody that I know in real life says something about reading my book, I cringe very deeply. This is not a thing that I've been enjoying, because I feel like the person that I present myself to be in real life is very different than the person that comes across in this book. And recently I was sitting with some friends and I found out that their 14-year-old daughter read my book, and I had to apologize to my friends. And her mother said, "It's okay. We've had some conversations about it." And so that's my most traumatic experience of people I know reading my book. I think
My old roommates, she was a teacher, she's like elementary school teacher, and she said, "Oh, I heard you wrote a book. I bought it and I gave it to my grade 8 student." I was like, "Oh my god!" I was like, "That's not kid friendly." She's like, "Oh, it's fantasy, right?" Like she didn't even know like adult fantasy existed, and I had to tell her. She's like, "Oh shit!" I'm like, "Yeah, that's not good."
Shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. A couple of my old teacher friends asked, they're like, because a couple of them read my stuff, and they're like, "Hey," or they hadn't read it yet, is what I meant to say. "Hey, do you think you'd want to present this to like 6th graders?" I was like, "Well,
No.
probably not." I said, "Your parents would be very happy."
Yeah, like I'm from a small town too. Like my town is like 300 people. And once my high school principal found out, she's like, "Oh, we'll put it in the school library. Kids can rent it out." And I was like, "No, like this is not appropriate."
Someone bought my book last night. I went to a festival last night, and yeah, she said, "Oh, it's for my daughter." I was like, I had to clarify, how old is your daughter? Is she like, and she's doing a HSC, which is like high school certificate now, and she's like 17, 18. I was like, okay,
Yeah.
that's good.
Yeah.
As long as she's not younger than that, I think we'll be fine. It was like, she was like, "I'll read it first. I'll make sure it's okay with her." Like, yeah.
Yes,
Just
I
be
mean,
prepared.
17, 18, that's kids these days are living pretty wild lives, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just nuts. It was funny because when I said like no, I told like my principal at the time, like, "No, don't put it in the library." She's like, "What? If they can read To Kill a Mockingjay, they can read your book." And I was like, "Fair enough, I guess."
I guess so.
I mean, okay. But yeah, so it's kind of funny like that.
Oh,
And then just so we all like, who are your inspirations? What made you pick up the pen, or which authors made you pick up the pen? I'm sure
Well,
David
Sean and I
Gemmell.
already said
Yeah.
Gemmell.
I was like, yeah, I'm sure he's gonna come up.
But I've also got this gentleman, Dennis Lehane. He's a crime writer out of Boston, and he writes private eye crime thrillers. And this one's historical fiction. It takes place in Boston, the Boston police riots in 1919. And his books are the reason I didn't really think that my books were that dark. I always feel like fantasy authors, we experiment with ideas, but in some ways we're not anywhere close to the stuff that contemporary writers are doing, because they're dealing with just a different angle to the grimdark, I guess, but it's not, because it's not fantasy. Anyway, His books are amazing. And he recently produced and directed Blackbird for Apple TV, which was about a man who went into prison or transferred to a prison to kind of try to trap a serial killer into confessing his multiple crimes. And it was just it. If you like Grimdark, you'd probably also like Lahaney if you ever read outside of fantasy.
I'll have to check him out.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Very good.
Sort of on the opposite end of things, like I was really inspired by Guy Gabriel Kay. Like I don't know, like his writing is just gorgeous, and I love history and just exploring different aspects of history. And I'm not a good enough writer to write to that level, so I thought, why don't I try something else? Yeah, well, maybe one day, but going, and I always brought that realism aspect to things. Not that his work isn't realistic or anything, but he doesn't seem to linger on the violence as much as I do. Maybe I'm just a darker person than he is.
Yeah, again, definitely, and that led to Louis L'Amour's, because Gemmell was inspired by Louis L'Amour, and my dad was a big. I mean, we probably 60 Louis L'Amour books. But Jim Butcher, actually, the more I think about it, and I remember some of my highlights. Like, I'd be on a bus ride, we'd be going to a football game, I'd have a Jim Butcher book. I'd be going to a wrestling tournament. Oh, it's winter, I'd have a Jim Butcher. Like, I was always looking for those new books from him. And I can't say that I've really taken a ton from him, but I think just that love that I had for these characters. I think the more I think about it, the more I realize how impactful he was. So definitely Jim Butcher.
For sure. For me, I got to give a shout out to my man, Sapkowski, author of the Witcher books. He, like anyone who knows me, I'm the biggest Witcher nerd there is, and I'll fight anyone who says they're a bigger nerd than me. But also Anthony Ryan too, who I've actually had the privilege to talk to on the channel. He was awesome. And then Sean actually got a quote from Anthony Ryan on his Godless Lands book, which is I was super jealous of.
Clayton got one too recently, the bastard.
Honestly, Anthony's so open. Like, and you watch this, I'm sorry if I'm sending people your way, but
he's wonderful. Yeah, he's a great guy.
He's an indie roots.
He's another one I've got on my shelf. Yeah, Bloodsong was indie originally. I didn't know that until recently.
Was it?
Really encouraged indie route just because of that. I was just like, okay, well, all right.
Yeah.
And like it was awesome. Like when I asked Anthony to come onto the channel, I was like, "Do you want to come on like with my 8 subscribers and it'll probably 0 views?" And he was like, "Sure." And I was like, "Oh, okay, awesome."
Wonderful.
So
Brian Stabley is another one in the trad world that he's a great guy, and I don't know if he would call himself grimdark, but gosh, he's awfully close. Like just the angle of his violence gets pretty heavy, and he's really good, and he's also another fantastic person that just kind of keeps me something to aspire to. Brian Stabley's another good guy.
I'd also like to toss out Evan Winters.
yeah.
Holy cow. Put up. Rage of Dragons and Waking Fire? Is that
No, the Waking Fire is Anthony Ryan.
Fires of Vengeance, I think.
Fires of Vengeance, sorry.
Oh.
Fire.
The Dragon books.
Holy cow. Between him and Anthony Ryan's Covenant of Steel series, I'm so stoked.
I gotta get into that.
Yeah, easily the best series I've read in a decade. Those two, Evan Winters and the Covenant of Steel. I've read 10 years.
One book, I like 2 authors I gotta give a shout out to who I think are just absolutely crushing it right now. Christopher Brenning, the author of The Hellborn King. If any of you seen him,
I've seen him everywhere.
Yeah, like Yeah, it is. He sent me the first copy to read, and I was like, sure, I'll read it. And I was like, every book I read just didn't scratch that grimdark itch because like I wasn't really like I want dark. And I started reading Hellborn King. I'm like, this is too much. You need to fucking back off, man. My eyes are bigger than my stomach on that one. So he's really good. And the other one, Holly Tinsley, is just absolutely crushing it. I'm devouring her second book right now.
I need to read that one.
The Hand That Cast the Bone. Yeah, follow up to Wee Men of Ashenshire. Oh, so good. And she has such a great way to talk in prose. Like she had such humor to her work. And I aspire to do that. I know when I write, I try to write a joke and I send it off to my mentor or my beta readers like, this isn't funny at all. This just falls flat. And I'm like, shit.
Humor is hard.
Humor is very hard to translate over page. And I respect authors. Nicholas Eames, another one I've had on the channel, does such a great job in Kings of the Wild.
Yeah.
Like, I was laughing, like tears in my eyes. And I've never had that from a book. I was like, man, like be a stand-up comedian. Like you're good enough to do that. All right. But before it's over an hour, I don't want to keep up too much of your time. I know it's late for our East Coasters and for NC. I know you're across the pond, I believe. And
Down under, aren't you?
Big pond.
Yeah.
The Pacific, yeah.
Yeah. So I don't want to take up too much of everyone's time. Thank you so much for, taking time out of your day to answer my questions and for talking about your books and the genre as a whole. I really appreciate it. And thanks for everyone who tuned in and asked their questions. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for the bottom of my heart. Before we go, sorry.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah.
Yes. Before we go, where can people pick up your books? I always forget this question. Where can people get your books? Because we're going to try and get a few sales.
Well, Brightwash is on all the regular Amazon platforms. There's some indie bookstores that are carrying it right now. And we just launched the audiobook to Audible. So that one is up for anyone holding on to an October credit soon. 23 and a half hours.
Jeez.
Cozy Grimdark.
I'm on Amazon, Kindle Unlimited. Stuff's on there. So Amazon's the way to find any of my books.
Yeah, same here. Amazon. There's a few indie bookstores. I think Silverstones is going to start carrying mine as well, which would be really cool. And yeah, mostly just Amazon, Kindle Unlimited.
Hail the Amazon corporate daddies.
Hey, stocked it to, screw that.
Yeah, I'm surprised they did that, honestly. I was like, oh, but I was like, good for them. Sticking up for us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, thanks everyone for taking time out of your day. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Absolutely means the bottom of my heart that you would come on our channel. And yes, thank you so much.
Thank
Yeah, man.
you.
Thanks again.